First of all, good evening, everyone. And what I want to do is I want to wear my entrepreneurship hat before I switch to the investor world, right? So I think the key is entrepreneurship is a global phenomenon. I think with internet, he talked about Twitter, he talked about Facebook. I think the way an entrepreneur thinks today, again, it depends on the nature of the business. If you're building a local business, you don't need to be worried about the globe. But there's nothing that stops you from thinking about a global business. To us, I think DFJ, as a venture capital fund, we're in US, China, India, Brazil, Russia, Israel, all the places where there is entrepreneurship happening. So if you look at fundamentally, a smart entrepreneur builds a product where it's cheap, raises money where they will get the maximum valuation, sells it in a country where he gets the maximum price, and takes it public where he gets best multiples, he or she. So an entrepreneur really has to be very opportunistic. And I also want to it is a sprint as well as a marathon. Every morning you wake up, I think Mr. Reddy talked about this. I mean, it's a 30-year, I don't know, you call it a sprint or you call it a marathon. Because in India till today, entrepreneurship is seen as a career risk, a financial risk, and a social risk. You have to overcome that. If I have my in-laws, they would want me to walk into that beautiful campus of Microsoft, as opposed to going into this startup in a residential locality in Begumpet. That still exists in the Indian mindset, but that's fast changing. As an entrepreneur, I think like Rohan pointed out, you got to go sell. You're a salesperson. Even if you're an engineer who is starting your enterprise, you got to sell to get the team. You got to sell to your wife and kids that you're going to disappear 6 or 7 days in a week. And you got to go sell to your investors. So you're always selling, right? And then the second big issue is, not just raising capital. I mean, the way I look at it is, if I'm a smart entrepreneur, investors will run after me. I mean, with all due respect, I'm an investor. I mean, there's plenty of money out there. The fact in India today is that there's more capital than quality entrepreneurs. And it hurts, but it's a fact. So if I'm the smart entrepreneur, it's in the investor's interest to chase me and give me money because they're going to multiply their money, right? So very clearly raising smart money, I think as Rohan pointed out, who is that investor who's going to add value? Who's going to bring the other team members? Who's going to open up doors for marketing and sales? How will they allow me to maybe take my business global? The third piece is really flawless execution. What we have realized and what we have learned, even as venture capitalists, in an Indian environment, execution itself is the barrier of entry. You don't need huge differentiation. I mean, you need differentiation, no doubt, because competitors can go confuse the marketplace, can confuse customers. But a lot of companies, when we map potential versus execution, they fail miserably in execution. So unless you execute very well, as a startup, what is your undue advantage? Your undue advantage is nothing but speed and flexibility, I think, as Dr. Reddy pointed out. The biggest challenge in an Indian context is really the flawless execution. The last piece is, I think, the market growth. Unfortunately, if you are in a sector where the market doesn't grow very fast, big boys can catch up. Take an example, online travel. I mean, you've got so many good companies in online travel. You have Make My Trip, you have got Clear Trip, you have Yatra, and there is another company called Via. Between 4 of these companies, they've raised $200 million in India. Roughly 1,000 crores they've raised as startups. And the reason why they've raised that kind of money, not many other startups in many other verticals, is because that's a marketplace that has grown very fast. Hence, the established companies couldn't catch up with the startups. So you need to, if you're playing in a market that's going to grow very fast, you're really lucky. So just to recap quickly, I think you want to get a good team. You want to raise capital from the right investor. You need to execute flawlessly. The odds are against you. And then you need to be in a market that grows fast. Last but not least, you need to do expectations management. I think, Rohan talked about valuation. The one thing that I've learned as an entrepreneur, and Dr. Reddy can share his, experience, well, it's very important that you own a big piece of the pie. It's also very important that 100% of 10 is less than a 10% of 10,000. You want to think about making the pie bigger. If the pie is not bigger, it doesn't matter how much you own. But that said, as an entrepreneur, you want to retain as much ownership of the company, no doubt, but you also have to incent all the other players.